All right, guys, I'm back here over at the shop, and I'm working on this 2005 Jaco Greyhawk Class C motorhome on a Ford E450 chassis. But none of that really matters because we'll be working on this step. This is a Kwikee RV electric power entry step, and this is a double step. And this is a pretty common problem that I see. So when you open it up, it starts making a racket like that. All right, but other than that, it does work. It just makes a very nice grinding noise. And it'll luckily do it going in too. So I think it's almost 2 years ago that I did my last Kwikee step video about repairing the motor. Let's see about repairing the gearbox and see if it's what I think it's gonna be. For me, I find it easiest to work in these steps when they're in that halfway out position. And the easiest way to do that is to unplug the step when it's halfway out. So I just prep it by kind of loosening up that lock right there so I can pull it out. Open the door. Now I'll climb underneath. I'll use my foot, or you can use a magnet on the door switch. You close the door and then just unplug it. Now it's in the halfway out position. Now with no tension on this linkage right there and good access to it, I can just pull the pin and take the tension off of it, pull that pin out. And look, now the gearbox and the motor is disconnected from the step itself, and it's unplugged so it's not going to crush my fingers. I'll unplug the motor. Okay. Part of me doesn't think the gear stripped out, that spur gear, because it actually does go in and out just fine. It does seem to be when it amps all out when it's all the way in, or amps out all when it's all the way out. Like it's, the gear is separating from the drive gear. So I feel like there's a little bit of flex within that transmission gearbox that might be the problem and not the gears itself. So let's go ahead and pull the gearbox off and see if we can't figure it out. But before I pull the entire gearbox out, let's go ahead and do the motor by itself. Okay, there'd be the motor. I can't say for sure if somebody's replaced this motor recently because it does look newer, but the step itself does look pretty new too. So let me just pull these 3 bolts out and drop the whole motor down, which is easy because there's no tension on the step itself. Okay, so it looks like these are 10 millimeter. Now remember, this is a Kwikee step, not a Lippert coach step. Okay, well that's weird. Huh. Wasn't expecting that. So if you look right in here in the gearbox, I can easily turn this. All right, so we can take a look. I'm not seeing any issues with the gears themselves. The spur gears look fine. In fact, this thing looks pretty new too. It moves effortlessly, no problem. Same with the step. Effortlessly, I can move this part. But let's go ahead and take a look at this motor. So I was expecting for this dowel pin to be missing right there. That's usually the most common problem I see, is that somebody changed out the motor. They didn't know this dowel pin was supposed to be there, because when they pulled the motor off, let me get this mock-up over here. I have a gearbox over here. Let me get that out of the way. A lot of times the dowel pin gets stuck in there, and so when you drop the motor, it stays in there because of the grease, and then while you're gone, the dowel pin drops out on the ground, but you didn't know it was there. So when you go put the motor in, you didn't have that dowel pin there, it's not there. And so without that there, it can cause, again, we'll just take this one off. That little spur gear right there to flex away from the next gear, because it can flex a little bit that way. And so it doesn't engage very well. That usually what causes a crack, 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 crack sound. But that's not the problem on this one. Oh yeah, don't use this limb. Don't lose these shims either. So I'm gonna guess that the problem must be, there's a worm gear right here that's turning the gear inside here. So I'd be let's go ahead and take this off just to take a look at it. This motor is actually from A&M. They make a lot of different motors, not just for the RV world, They do make windshield wiper motors, and that's a very similar motor you're going to find in a car power window. All right, well, I'll have to get snap ring pliers. Get that out of the way. Get that out of the way. Let's see. Might be hard to appreciate, but it's really, this plastic gear is worn out pretty substantially right there. I can feel it with my finger. There's a worm gear. It's got a metal gear on it. That a worm gear on the motor itself is a metal gear. So we could theoretically just probably put that worn section right there 180 degrees away from it. That way when it turns and did the half turn and the half turn the other way, it would be fine, but I can't warranty something like that. But it is good to know what the problem was. Yeah, I know. Let's see. It's pretty crazy that it's all worn out. At any rate, we got a new motor right here. I just picked that up. Look at this. Looks like it's going to be the same motor. I'll have to put a link in the description what the part number is from Kwikee, or from Lippert now, because it's a Lippert product now, not Kwikee. So yeah, it's really just going to be a swap out. It comes with some bolts. Let me put my shim back on and put my adapter, so it'll go from the shaft right here. Fit perfectly. Don't forget that important dowel pin that I thought was going to be the problem. I really thought this was going to be the issue, but it wasn't. So that's it. Now we just have to go back and install it. Before we install it, let's go ahead and test it out. Now I didn't point it out when I showed you how to run that thing out manually and unplug it. Sometimes that controller doesn't work. So I do actually have a harness I keep in here for motors. So if the step motor controller or the wall switch isn't working, we can just go ahead and unplug that. Plug this right back into the motor, just like that. Plug it in. And you wouldn't believe where I found this. You get this harness off an old controller, just cut off the harness. That way you have a test one in the future. So I got my cordless drill battery. Shouldn't matter, it's a DC motor, so 12 volts all we really need. Positive, negative, that'll spin one way. One way. And there's the other way. So at least that works. I was not expecting to find that this gear right there was the weak point. The more you know, I guess. Well, turned out to be a little bit easier job than I thought it was going to be. Okay. It's a pretty simple job here then. Just make sure our dowel pin's on there, our gear's on there, and the shim's on there, and we're just gonna line up the holes again. Because it doesn't really matter where we're gonna put this. Alright, brand new bolts. Do the good thing and start them by hand first. I just thought that somebody already changed out this motor and forgot to put that dowel pin back in. That's what I was hoping. But there's that controller right there, and here's that motor harness that you just can follow up there, cut it off at the controller. Alright, so click and click. Just have to plug the motor back in. Now, do make sure you still have the, let's see, this controller still unplugged, because the last thing you want to do is plug in this motor right here and have the step retract on your fingers. Now, it's not vital, but I don't like how this harness hangs here, so I usually just put a zip tie around the harness and the motor casing right there. It's also nice too, because a lot of times that locking tab on that harness breaks, and so that keeps it from falling off. And of course, we're still free right here. We can just go ahead and go above. All right. Now I can just move the step where I need it to be. right about there. Which is why it's nice to stop that step wherever. It's not ideal to have the arm at the extremes because it's hard to push the step in all the way or pull it out all the way to line this up. Then I can even do that one-handed. That's how little tension is on there. And because I'm putting this out in the internet for everybody to watch, let me go ahead and change out the cotter pin. So they don't have to be told that I should have changed out the cotter pin. Let's go ahead and put that in right about there. Alright, I think that's bent enough. Now before I go back underneath to plug it in, I'm going to open the door here. Mostly that way, so if the step is turned on accidentally, it's going to try to extend and not retract and crush me, or crush my fingers. Here, go ahead and plug this back in. Hey, look at that. Simple. And then now, before we go back up to test it out a few times, let's run through the step operation. You only have 4 wires on there. You have 3 power wires. The actual step power is going to be from on the red wire there. This yellow wire is ignition power, so when you turn the key on, it senses ignition power. The white wire is going to be the rocker switch at the entry door that gives power. And of course, these new modern ones, it's backwards, so the off position is the on position. So if it has power here, it's off, right? I think that's how it is now. Seems to make sense, because now those Fleetwood switches that light up, and when you turn them on, they're lit up and the step is off because it has power. I don't know why they did that. And then the last wire is going to be the brown wire. The brown wire is switched ground, which should go to either the magnet switch at the door jamb itself, or it might be a plunger switch, but it's going to be feeding ground. So it is possible that your rocker switch at the entry door doesn't have power or blew the fuse, but if you turn the key on, the step will still work, because those are independent systems, or vice versa. So sometimes you can do a little bit of troubleshooting that way if the step works with the ignition, but not with this rocker switch, or if it works with the rocker switch, but not the ignition. It's likely a power issue or the controller. That'll give you some direction. If you're ever going to lube up a step because it's binding, because it got bent usually, these are the ports you really want to lube up. This is the, there are brass bearings or bronze bearings right here. This whole shaft is what's turned by the motor arm, or this gearbox arm. That's what's actually moving the slide, or that's what's moving the step in and out. So everybody gets their can of lube and lubes up the side pivots right here on the outside where you can see it, but it's really right here all the way around on this shaft right there where you definitely want to make sure you're hitting. And then don't forget the ones way back here. Like I said, everybody gets the ones that are very easy to find on the outside, but again, you have I think you do have washers right there. I already tried this step in and out. I don't need to lube it. Lubing is just what I'm going to do if it's actually binding. If I were to add lube where we don't need to lube it, all it's going to do is attract dirt anyways and compound the problem. Then you have to keep lubing it and cleaning it, lubing it and cleaning it. So usually it's only if it got bent, you have to add a little bit of lubrication to persuade it. But if it's old step, this under chassis area right here will get quite rusty, and that's where the lubrication is going to help. And then right here is that magnetic door switch. It's just a little reed switch. There's a magnet that actually operates it, so I could theoretically, just using the magnets on my bit box here, just put it right there against the switch, and that'll make it work too. But if you remember when we started this video, when the step would come all the way out, it would click, 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 or it would go all the way up, or get almost all the way up and go click, 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 and then eventually turn itself off. That controller that we saw underneath is both a timer and it does detect current. So when I shut the door, that little magnet switch right there sends ground to the controller, so to shut the switch, the motor, it senses the amp load when it's all the way out and turns off power to the motor. So even if I were to run this out, see, it senses that amp load and it turns the step off. So it is a built-in safety on it too. I would have to shut the door again, go all the way out with it. Pretty simple system. Coach step has a different brain on it. It's still a Lippert product, but they work the exact same way. Even the wiring schematic, I think, is the same. But very standard RV step. It was actually a ridiculously easy job to do. I think that motor is about $80. I don't remember anymore. Like I said, I'll put a link to it, so if you guys need one. You just need to make sure that you get the information off the step. There's two motors. One's the older motor. They call it pre-IGLM. I don't remember offhand, which is the older controller was a bigger board, and then the post or the IGLM, I don't remember again. The newer controller, it looks like the one underneath there, it's kind of wedge shaped. The only other difference is on a triple step. If you have a Kwikee with a triple step, those have a high torque motor because it is a lot more resistant. And again, it's not really fair either, because I think on those high torque motors, the polarity is reversed. So there has to be a jumper on it that switches the polarity to the motor. And sometimes people lose that. And so when you open the door, and on those, if you shut the door and the step extends, you open the door and the step retracts, that's likely what's happening, is that polarity of the motor is backwards. That's everything. But I do know it's been a while since we actually did a repair on the channel, so I wanted to do something. I thought it was going to be something a little bit different, where I was going to show you an actual common problem that would help you troubleshoot it. This gear right there getting stripped out. But like anybody probably would have done anyways, would just order a new motor and call it good. Simple job, 3 volts, a 1 wiring connection, and just take some time. Very easy to do. That was a Kwikee double step, but it's going to be pretty much identical for the single step or a wider double step. Anyways, thanks a lot for watching, guys, and I hope that helped. Oh, one more thing. We will likely be doing a different repair on this coach there too. So I guess that's what I'm going to do next. Bye. It's kind of a little ironic. I was contacted from A&M Equipment, I don't know, about a year ago, and asked me if I could make a video for them. And I said, what the heck do you want me to make a video for you guys for? Nobody's going to buy motors from you guys because of me. Ironic. It's even funnier because, you know, they found me based on the video in which I told people they can fix a motor and they don't have to buy a new one. Wasn't what I thought it was going to be, but that's why it's important as a technician. Work the problem and don't just assume things. So I thought it was going to be one thing. I ended up being wrong, and I had to change what the problem was and still troubleshoot it, not just get locked in on what I thought the problem was going to be. But none of that really matters because we're working on the Kwikee double. But none of that information really matters because we're going to be. But none of that really matters because we'll be working on the Kwikee double. But none of that really matters because none of that really matters because we will be working on the But none of that really matters because we'll be working on this step. I'll open up the door. All right, so looks like these are 7/16. Okay, so it looks like these are 10 millimeter. So,